Start with a study session. This is something that we're doing new for the first 15 minutes. So if you read the agenda, this first 15 minutes will be for us to review and discuss the board teamwork section on how not to be a terrible school board member by Richard E. Meyer, and the presenter is going to be Mr. Tenney.
Okay, super. Thank you, Mr. Golgoski. So as you mentioned, this is something we've not done before, but there are several districts that we know of that do something similar. Some with this very book, they use this for a kind of a book study. There are other districts that use similar materials or whatnot and spend the first part of their board meeting doing that. I think I mentioned to you in the past when we brought this up in our public meetings that this was a book I was introduced to at actually one of our ASBA conferences by Mr. Binder. Mr. Binder had a former colleague of his who is a superintendent, right, down the valley. He's doing just this with this book. So I was intrigued by the title. It's obviously tongue-in-cheek, where I don't think anybody here is a terrible school board member. But I ordered it, and I looked, and I said, this is actually pretty cool. They're like 4 pages long each, super short, and just kind of a case study type of a thing. And so brought that to the board. The consensus was we'd try it out. And I'd like to recommend, and you tell me how you feel after we do this, that we do this month, next month, and the following month. And then if people feel like that's valuable, that's a good use of our time, that we continue. And if people feel like that is 15 minutes of my life I will never get back, then we don't have to continue beyond that. I'll touch on the title one more time for those in the audience or those watching on our live stream. Again, the title is Tongue-in-Cheek, How Not to Be a Terrible School Board Member. And we've had some discussion around that. Does that mean that we think people are terrible school board members? Of course not. I was actually scrolling through on my phone the other day, and I found an article, How to Be the Absolute Backpacker at the Campsite. And it was the same kind of a thing. If you want to be a terrible backpacker at the campsite, play your radio, camp too close to somebody else, et cetera, et cetera. But the idea is, of course, don't do these things. These are things that will make you better. So I spent 30 seconds looking up, is this a common or uncommon thing? And I found How to Be a Terrible Teacher, Tips and Tricks to Do Your Worst, 6 Easy Steps for Becoming the Worst Parent Ever, and then 7 Classic Mistakes of New Superintendents. So anyhow, it's a fairly common thing to have a tongue-in-cheek look at. Did you buy that one? Actually, that was just an article, and I did read it. Yeah, so anyhow, with that in mind, I thought we'd dive in. The first chapter we're looking at, like Mr. Golgoski said, is actually chapter 8. There's different sections of the book, and the section I thought we might start with was the section on board teamwork, like we talked about. So the first chapter on board teamwork is disrespect a fellow board member. I think we probably all had a chance to look over it, but just for the audience, I'll summarize really quickly the scenario that we're looking at. It's been a long board meeting. You're 3 hours into it. And Marcia, who's one of the board members, she decides to speak at some length about a topic that she's covered many times, how girls are not treated fairly in schools. There's another board member, Richard. That's the name of the guy who wrote the book, by the way. And Richard just groans and rolls his eyes. Marcia looks over and says, Richard, am I boring you? And Richard says, hey, it's been a long meeting. Could you get to the point, please? And she said, my point is that girls need to be treated fairly. And Richard replies, oh my gosh, Marcia, do you know anything about what goes on in our classrooms? It's boys who are treated badly. And Marcia replies, and this is a perfect example of what girls have to put up with in classrooms when they try to express their ideas. And the meeting ends awkwardly with both board members upset. So there's the scenario where somebody, Richard, the author of the book, I think, was being a terrible board member. And then each chapter goes on to then do kind of a plan B, a reflection on what didn't go well, what should we have done better. In this case, Richard thinks to himself, was that really all that bad? You're all adults here, so you shouldn't have to sugarcoat every word that we say, right? That's a reasonable perspective. It does mention as well the district's business is much easier to conduct in an atmosphere of mutual respect. To the degree that you have ruined that atmosphere, you have diminished the board's effectiveness. Those are both interesting points. And then there's 5 different options. What could Richard have done better, et cetera, et cetera. You probably read that. I just wondered if, as board members have gone through this, if you had thoughts. And I got a couple of quick discussion questions we could use if everybody's like, I don't know what to say. But I figure you probably do. Any thoughts? I
can just tell you the one, am I on? The one thing that I underlined that I thought was interesting, that the mindset should be that, let's see, how do we word it? That every board member is well-intentioned. That they have good intentions coming in, and we should try to keep that in mind, that they're here to do what's best for kids. So when we have disagreements, that should be the heart, our core philosophy.
Absolutely. And I
my
completely
2
agree.
cents.
That's the case with our board members, for sure. Other thoughts?
I like that, Jane.
Did you underline that too?
No, I didn't underline anything, but I did read it.
No,
That part's optional,
I
actually,
I was,
underline.
I was going for resale, you know, no underlining when I did that.
Right.
No, I'm just kidding.
Very important.
That's right. No, I like that. I did highlight that. And just to quote it, we may not always agree on every issue, but we recognize that we're all just trying to do what is best for the kids. And that's under the cultivating an atmosphere of mutual respect. And that resonated with me, honestly. I think, we may not, there's points on there where you might not agree with each other on every issue, but you should try to understand their points and make your own points respectfully. And honestly, when I did the checklist, I didn't pick the last two. I mean, I got one of them. I didn't choose that last one where it was the answer, but I don't know if it was an eye-opening statement in there that I mean, there's no wrong answers, but there are definitely some right answers.
Okay, so to clarify, the options that he gave,
Yeah.
the author is suggesting that last option, what is it? Add your points after Marcia in a respectful way. He's suggesting that's maybe the best of the options, and you're saying, I didn't immediately recognize
I
it that
didn't
way.
because I felt
Okay.
like I would be talking down to the person, is the way
Gotcha.
that I thought. Like, we're all adults, so
Sure.
why would I be explaining something to somebody else? I didn't feel like it was my place.
Okay,
Because we're
okay.
all adults.
Any other thoughts? Yeah, on every one of these, one of the other things that appealed to me when I first, when Mr. Binder introduced this to me and I looked over it was, there's obviously the scenarios around board members and what board members could do well or could do better in the future. But on each one, there's a lessons for superintendents piece as well. A couple of things that I picked up. Some of them are really quite good. They're like, superintendent, if you let this happen, you blew it. This one wasn't so much that way, right? Because somebody, anybody could express their opinion or whatnot. But the lessons that I wrote down for myself was to make sure there's board training sessions around this very kind of thing. And this is sort of part of what we're doing. We don't have a paid trainer coming in, but we're sort of, talking with each other about. Let's have that mindset of working effectively with each other, right? This whole section, the first three of which that we'll be looking at the next 3 months is board teamwork. That's a big part of being an effective board, of conducting the business of the district in an effective way. So at any rate, that's one of the pieces I wrote down for myself is make sure that, a superintendent should make sure there's board training sessions around this kind of thing. Setting a tone of mutual respect herself or himself, the superintendent should be doing that. If the superintendent is kind of nasty and saucy all the time, how could she or he expect anybody else to be any better than that? So I need to set a standard for myself and for us that's one of mutual respect. And then the third piece I wrote down for myself is to, if something like that were to happen, and I don't think, one of the other reasons I chose this first, honestly, was I felt like this is an area we're actually pretty good. We're actually pretty strong. It wasn't something that somebody was going to read and feel sensitive about, right? At any rate, if we did have a scenario like that, one of my responsibilities would be to work with the board president to get the discussion back on course a little bit, right? If Jane is being nasty to Andy, let's say, and let's say it's the very same situation. Jane said, girls, whatever, and Andy said, oh, this, and they're rolling their eyes back and forth and kind of snapping and whatnot. And Stan just looks like, wow, I'm in over my head. What do I do about this? I could help him out. And sort of, well, you know what? That part wasn't agendized. We were going to be talking about whatever instead. So anyhow, those are all responsibilities that I might have. And I'll just underscore what you each said earlier, that we're all here to do what's best for kids. There's not one of us here that doesn't have that at heart. So that's awesome. We all have that same goal. How we should approach that goal, some of us sometimes have different ideas about how we balance that, right? How we balance funding, et cetera. But we all have the same goal, so that's important. Another couple of pieces that I highlighted for myself, our tone matters, not just what we say, but the way that we say it, I think matters. And then it was brought up by a couple of you. I've sort of summarized it for myself as disagreeing disagreeably. There's absolutely nothing wrong with disagreeing with somebody, with having a different opinion than somebody else. That's a part of what's supposed to happen. If we all think the very same thing, do the very same thing all the time, we're going to be wrong a fair share of the time. if we don't have differing and dissenting and balancing opinions, I feel like. But when we do disagree, it's important to do what I feel like we've always done, which is disagree disagreeably, right? We leave the room, we smile at each other, nobody wants to go and, kick the other person's dog or anything like that, so.
I think that's what as being a new board member,
Sure.
I think that's what is the most comfortable here, is you can express what you feel or what you are being led by your constituents, because they are our stakeholders.
Sure.
And we're in it for their children or grandchildren and their tax money. So I don't see that this applies to us as a board, and I was very critically looking at that.
Sure.
Because I figured, okay, I'm going to get my dukes up on this one, but it doesn't apply
Sure.
to
In
us.
terms of there's not a real need for correction on the part of our board.
No,
is that what
I
you're saying?
don't
Yeah.
think so, not yet.
The
It-
principles probably apply, right? We should disagree, we
Right.
should be kind, et cetera. But
Yeah.
That's what you're saying. I got you. Yeah, good. I would agree with that. Any other thoughts around that?
The only thing, my husband read it as well, and he told me, don't slouch or make weird faces.
All right, good.
That was his advice.
Good
after that
advice.
chapter.
Good advice. Great.
I think to help us along, just since we've done the first one, is it's 4.5 pages. Maybe we post it too, and when we
Okay.
post the
Yeah.
agenda, because I think there's probably points that you'd probably like to see
great idea.
if you're going to read it, and then you can see what we're talking about for the most part.
I think that's an excellent idea. I think putting it up on the screen
Sure.
with the choices, then we get audience,
Oh,
buy
audience
into that.
participation.
They
I
know
like
what we're talking about.
The one thing that I also, after reading this, the whole thing is, not only does it apply just on a board, but, when I'm in a meeting or something like that, these really are very applicable, and this is how we should be treating each other anyway, so, yeah, it's a good book, it's a quick read.
Great,
for sure.
great. Well, if that's all right, we'll go ahead and wrap this part up, move into the main part of our agenda here in just a minute. But next month, we'll look at the very next chapter then, if it's okay.
Oh.
Terrible habit number 9, speak for the board. That's something you're not supposed to do, right? Like, you're not supposed to disrespect other board members. So we'll look at that. There's a scenario where somebody in public said, the board feels this way and the board will do this, and, wait a minute, we shouldn't be doing that. So we'll talk about that next month. All right, thanks for that. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to District number 1 to order. First of all, we'd like to welcome everybody that's here tonight. And Kevin, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? All right, thanks. Next item is item 4A, considering the approval of our agenda. I'll take a motion to approve.
I'll move that we approve the agenda as presented.
We have a motion to have a second.
Second. Motion
And seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Thanks, Andy. Okay, motion passes. Item 5A, approval of the minutes. Consider approving the minutes from the regular study session and voting session meeting of March 5th, 2024, as presented. I'll take a motion.
I'll move that we approve the minutes from the regular study and voting session of March 5th as presented.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Motion and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Item 6A, we have a presentation of well, we're going to hold on that one?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going
Can I address that just?
to,
real quick?
absolutely.
Super. So we have a young man who attends Mile High Middle School, who was one of the winners of the county spelling bee this year. I think won the spelling bee at Mile High and ended up being one of the top 3 placers in the spelling bee. And we were anticipating him being here this evening. His principal and a couple of his teachers are here. We don't see him yet. So with your permission, could we table this agenda item, see if he shows up in a little bit? If he does, maybe come back to this. Is that okay? And if he's not able to come for some reason, we'll present it to him in another form.
Okay.
Okay, and Andrew Good is his name, by the way, and we're super proud of Andrew.
Great.
So we hope he's able to make it this evening. If not, we'll come up with Plan B there.
Great. Okay, so this is a presentation, no need for a motion. We'll just reinsert it when we need to. Item 6B, instructional minutes. Ms. Secor.
Hi, good evening. Well, I'm excited to give you an update on one of the biggest events happening in PUSD throughout the month of April, and that is state testing. We are in the thick of it at this current point in time. So just wanted to give you a little bit of information around what is required for testing. So as a reminder, grades 3 through 8 for ELA and math, they take the AASA assessment. Grade 9 takes the ACT Aspire in all 4 of those core subjects. Grade 11 takes the ACT, and then grades 5, 8, and 11 all take our Arizona Sci test. So as you know, our teachers work all year long to get our kids ready for this assessment. They're teaching standards, they're assessing student progress, they're monitoring that, they're doing reteach and intervention opportunities. So that's just part of it. The other part that I wanted to highlight for you today is the other side of testing that we have to prepare students for as well. And I would really encourage anybody who's never done this to get onto the Arizona AASA site. You can take all of these practice tests just like our students do. So we do prepare our students all year long by teaching standards, but because our assessments are taken on the computer, there is a technology component that we do have to teach our students. We do have to teach them how to take these kinds of assessments. So if you're curious how to find these assessments, all you have to do is go to the Arizona Department of Ed website for AASA. You're going to scroll down here to where it says sample tests, and then you're going to click sample tests and tutorials. You can see that this TestNav is the navigation software that we use, along with a lot of other states. You click on Arizona, and here's where it gets tricky, because this is the login page for students, but if you're just taking sample tests, you have to click this tiny little button down here to access those sample tests. And so we're going to just show you a little glimpse of the AASA for 3rd grade. We're going to take the ELA assessment. So in this section, there's 24 questions. All of this is what a student has to navigate. This is a 3rd grader taking an online assessment for the very first time, and we didn't even have to log in. That's a whole nother challenge that our teachers face with students for the first time. So as you can see, this first question pops up. Students have to know that they have to scroll all the way through this first question. They have to read this first passage and then answer a question. They're going to move on to the next one.
Kelsey, I got a real quick question. If
Yes.
a kid just sees the picture of the bird at the top and reads what's there and doesn't scroll, surely teachers can come in behind them and say, "Oh, sweetie, you're supposed to scroll down and do that." Yes?
No.
No.
We cannot tell them what they need to do on the test, which is why taking these practice assessments is crucial. Students have to be able to navigate. So it's not just a question of, do they know the content, can they answer the questions, but it's can they navigate the technology component as well. And again, keep in mind, this is for a third grader. Here, they have to answer two parts of a question around this same reading passage. More questions on the same passage. Here, they have to actually move and drag and drop answers into the correct category. They have to choose from drop-down menus and multiple choice. And then here's where it gets even more complicated. That first one was one passage. This next question, or this next set of questions for a third grader, has two passages that they have to navigate between. So they're not only answering questions about one article, they're now comparing two articles and the content that's within them. So again, this is just for a third grader. So you can see again, they're asked to click. There could be one right answer, there could be five. They're not told in all of them how many. So just wanted to give you an idea of what our students are up against when they do take these state assessments. So this is just one. I'd really encourage you, go onto any content, take a look, see what our students are being asked to do. It is no easy task. Sarah, can you go to the next one for me? Thank you. So next I wanted to show you a schedule, or our schedule for the month of April. Our testing does take almost the entire month of April, so it is a disruption to our learning environments for that entire month in order to get this accomplished. So this is week one, and you can see that within week one, we have writing assessments happening, we have Arizona Sci, we have ELA and math for certain grade levels. That's just in week one, and then we also have makeup tests happening all along the way because there's different deadlines for each one of these tests. I'm going to the next one. And then we get into week two. Most of the writing is done at this point. We've just got a few makeups that are happening, and AZ Sci is almost wrapped up by the end of week two. But we also start on oral reading fluency exams for our third graders, plus ELA and mathematics assessments, and then our ACT and ACT Aspire. So you can tell this is a very big week for testing in our schools. And then week three, we start to see it die down a little bit. We still have reading and math happening. We still have ACT that's also happening. And then by the fourth week, it's primarily for makeup exams. And so we make sure that by the end of April, we have every student tested in all of those different subjects. This is quite the task. As you can imagine, it takes a village to make this happen and to make it happen so seamlessly. So if you want to go to that very last one for me. I would just like to give a giant thank you, and if you see these people in this next month or so, please tell them thank you. First and foremost goes to Renee Steingraber, who's our testing coordinator. She is behind the scenes getting everybody ready, plus navigating any issues that come up throughout the month. All of our classroom teachers who not only taking care of students every day, who are teaching them this content, but now they are test administrators for the month of April. All of our administrators who, again, are organizing this on the school level, creating schedules, making sure the testing environment is right. Our team of instructional coaches who are helping teachers and administrators, and our amazing IT team who does a ton to get our technology ready so that it goes off without a hitch. And I will tell you, so far, we've had a very successful couple weeks, but this is a massive undertaking for our district. And so I just want to give those people who are making this happen and making it happen so seamlessly a big thank you. And that's it. Any questions?
I just had one question
Yes.
on the first chart. Do the 11th graders take the AZ science and the science portion of the SAT?
Yes,
Two tests?
correct.
And which one gets put into our averages at the end, like if they...
As as far as proficiency?
Yeah.
So they're shown in two different areas. So we have separate data for just the AZ Sci, and then we have ACT data that's either compiled or you can break apart into those core subjects. Yeah.
Have they completely gone away with any paper pencil option at all for every student? Are we all digital at this point?
We are mostly digital. Paper pencil tests are available for a student as an accommodation if they do need that, but I will tell you it's very rare that we have a paper pencil test for a student.
Sure.
Yeah, and that's really changed in the last 10 years. 10 years ago, when I was in the classroom, we were doing paper pencil, and you have to turn in your stack of books, and
Yeah, right.
it's a different process now.
So we're feeling good about the bandwidth and everything. I love it. All right.
I
Good.
would have to give a huge thank you to Michael Napier for coming in and making sure that we are able to do what we do. The first couple years were definitely a learning curve, and we had to schedule people at different times, but now we don't even have to count the number of Chromebooks that we have on Wi-Fi. We can put everybody on, and we don't have to worry about it. So that is a huge accomplishment,
Thanks,
because
everybody.
that was not the way it was a few years ago.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Michael.
Kelsey, what about practice tests? When do teachers normally initiate those?
So
That would be in March, or?
it depends. We use Galileo right now as
Yep.
practice as
Sure.
well. So teachers will pull up those questions, maybe do a question of the day or do a review after our benchmark assessments. But really when we get into the practice test you just saw is about March,
Okay.
to make sure that that's fresh and students really know how to navigate that technology within their assessment.
Yeah, I remember when I was doing it, was the toggling back and forth between passages that
Yeah.
really hung some of the kids up. They didn't realize they could even do that.
Yeah.
So that's great.
Yep.
Kelsey,
Yes.
since Renee said, it's one test out of the whole year that the kids are taking right now, one day
Yeah.
in time, why don't we incorporate these practice tests during the entire year? There's 24 questions, that'd be 24 weeks. Then they would all be prepared to take those type of tests.
That's a great point. But that's why we use Galileo ahead of time, because they have assessments that are very similar to what they'll see on here. We don't take this practice test the entirety until right before. I will tell you there are some teachers, though, who do exactly what you say. Maybe one question every week, but then they'll do the entire test again as a practice.
In professional development, we were taught how to create our own tests
Oh,
from our curriculum. And that's what I thought the digs were doing, is that they were creating some assessments so it's not so stressful to the kids. And maybe if it's incorporated throughout the year, that would help them too,
yeah, and that's where we have those assessments from Galileo.
instead of
Teachers-
waiting
Correct.
till the end.
Yeah, that's way too much to wait until March to teach them. So that's why we're doing those assessments all along. So our classroom teachers right now within Galileo can create a 5 or a 10 question assessment on one standard, and they are going through those with students all throughout the year.
But
It's-
these are aligned with the AASA,
Correct.
right?
And so is
So
Galileo.
they would be more appropriate
But
than,
Galileo is too.
Galileo's aligned as well.
It's the same.
yes,
It is
but
a
it's
computer-based
still
test.
kind of different kinds of apples. So if they're used to doing these, they are practice tests, let's take advantage of them, because that's what we look at is the test scores.
Yeah, and we are. Our teachers are doing a great job
Okay.
of preparing students for all aspects
Great.
of these assessments. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks,
I-
Kelsey.
Could I ask a question?
Go ahead,
Yes,
Andy.
go ahead.
Sorry, it's tough to tell when to break in. Kelsey, when the Beyond textbooks is fully in place, how is that going to impact the creation of these tests throughout the year that we're doing now? Is there going to be a big change? Is Beyond textbooks a better platform? What's your opinion on that?
Good question.
That is a great question. So the platform that Beyond Textbooks uses is called Performance Matters. So it's a different platform that's not Galileo. Galileo is a little archaic, I'll be honest. It doesn't have all of the functionality like you just saw within these technology questions. They do have a lot. But Performance Matters, which is what will be our new assessment program, does look more like this. And it has all of those assessments from Beyond Textbooks already loaded into it. So all of those assessments that are truly aligned to Arizona state standards. However, the beauty is our teachers can also create additional practice assessments along the way. So they'll have ones that we're asking them to give on certain standards, but then they can go in and practice as much as they need to. So it's giving them more opportunity to get those type of questions in front of students on the computer or in a paper pencil version.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Andy, next time you want to know when to jump in, just read people's body language. You'll be all right.
Come on, buddy. All right, we're going to move on. Thanks, Kelsey. We're going to move on to item 6C, the Auditor General Spending Report. Mr. Moore.
Just after all of last year's reports are done, the auditor reports are brought to you, you think that last year's over, and it's not. So this is the last thing, I believe, that is brought in front of the governing board each year, and that is our Auditor General's report. Just to remind the governing board, what this is all public schools, districts, are analyzed in the Auditor General's classroom spending report. We're compared to like-size operational districts, like-size operational for transportation, and there's 207 districts that get analyzed, and we're one of them. And so that's the purpose of this, is to basically give a snapshot of, are we being good stewards of the taxpayers' money, and putting the money in the right areas. You will not see comparisons to charter schools. They don't have to go through this. We do have a slide that I did some manipulation and comparisons that Mr. Tunney asked me to do. But other than that, here is our end of the year report card, I guess you can say. So, oh, yay. Okay, just kind of remember about our demographics. You know, our counties, you have a pie. We're actually in the operational peer group of 3, transportation group of 5, achievement group of 1. And it just goes through. It does consider us a medium to large size district, a city. Special education, we have 13% of our students that have IEPs. Our poverty did go up in Prescott from 2022 to 23. It was 11%, and now it's 13.
Can I ask a clarifying question? So is that the poverty rate of our students?
Nope. It's the residents within the Prescott's boundary. Doesn't matter where the students go.
And
It does not include any students that come from neighboring districts.
Gotcha.
And their socioeconomic demographics.
And we do have some data that gives us a feel for what the poverty level of our students are, right, with free and reduced lunch. Do you recall what that was recently?
Yeah, the
I do.
district now is over 40% free and reduced, and I think 3 of our schools are now over 50.
So substantially different than the poverty level in the Prescott area. That's, for various districts in the state, that's not necessarily the case. If you live in Catalina Foothills district in Tucson, you live in kind of a high-rent district. If you don't have a lot of money, you live in a different part of Tucson. In Prescott, if you live in the more expensive parts of Prescott, you live in the more expensive parts. But if you live in the less expensive parts, you're still in Prescott. We don't have the less expensive part of Tucson that's in another district, or the less expensive part of Prescott that's in another district. So it's interesting, probably more than almost any other district, except for perhaps the exception of Flagstaff. There's a real discrepancy between our community poverty rate and the poverty rate of our students, which like Brian says, almost 4 times as high.
When it went up, at first, when it comes to that poverty rate, what that drives is which academic peer group that we're in. They just take the city, they take the suburb, they take the poverty rate, and then they look at the other medium to large cities, and they break it up by the poverty. And so for cities, last time it was 13% or higher is a grouping, and 12% or lower. And I'm like, oh, we went into the other. Well, then they changed it. It is now 13% or lower, and that's an academic. So we're still with the Vail, the Deer Valley, the Scottsdales.
Paradise Valley.
Paradise
Catalina Foothills,
Valley.
yeah.
And so it is 14% or higher that's in the opposite.
Just to clarify, the poverty rate is just students in the Prescott area? Or is that-
It's the
Not that poverty.
households in Prescott's boundaries that they say are in poverty.
Okay, so that is different than English language population, which, is that in the schools or is that not in the schools?
For this?
English language.
English language,
So-
that's English language learner students in our schools. So
Okay,
if we have
the-
3,600
So special
students.
education is in our schools,
Correct.
English
Yes.
language learners is in
In
our
our
schools.
schools.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Graduation rate is in
In
our
our
schools,
schools, poverty
but poverty
rate
rate
is
is not in our
households
schools.
That's a
in our
great, that's a
boundaries.
great question.
And it's a really good question because why that's kind of the outlier, I'm unsure, because they do have free and reduced lunch numbers for all districts. We actually now get funding based on what our free and reduced lunch percentage is. So why they chose for academic comparability to use the boundaries poverty rate, I have no idea, but it puts us in the category that has about 13 or so of the highest socioeconomic well-off districts. And like I said, before it
Okay.
was 13% or higher was in a group and 12% or lower, and we were 11. Well, when I saw 13, I'm like, oh, we're in the other group. Well, they moved it. So now it's 13% or lower and 14% or higher. So anyway,
It's just confusing why
yeah,
it was
it is.
school population.
It is a good. So everything is school-based, student level, except for this, and it's for the academic peers. One thing on the graduation rate, this is the last year that you'll see the graduation rate in one number because we do have our DRP, our Dropout Recovery Program, is a separate school, and those students will now have their own graduation rate, and so will the brick and mortar Prescott High School.
Okay, it says 2021 graduation rate, so 21, 22 year, 23. I always get these years confused. So this is 2 years
You know
ago?
what?
Did you?
I'll have to look. This, what we're looking at is the 22-23 school year, but they're always a few years behind when they're grouping because that data and that census data is not available when they're doing it. So I do believe that that is 2 years behind.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay.
Wait, is the graduation rate 2 years behind also?
It does say 21.
Yeah, because ours is like
And Carl, what
85
I'll have to do,
or
because
90.
unfortunately I have a bad habit of using like a presentation and tables from the previous year, and then I have 3 people look to make sure I changed every single date. I'll have to look to see if that actually should be 22 rather
Okay.
than 23, and I'll let you know. But they are behind on it
Okay.
even as
I-
much.
The years always confuse me, so I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, this is the main portion, and basically it takes all of the dollars that we spent and puts it into 7 categories. The top 3 categories are the ones that usually are most focused on, and that is instruction. It's really anything that's going on in the classroom, and you see a description underneath the pie graph of what that instruction category. This is all based on our account coding, so literally every purchase, every hired service all has, I think it's a 27-digit account code, and puts it into these categories and others. Student support, you'll see that's mostly our special education. It's our SLPs, our physical therapists, our OTs, our nurses. Instructional support, the main folks that are in there are our instructional coaches, which help our teachers instruct our students. And you put those 3 categories together, and it's what really is compared across all districts, and it's our total classroom spending. Everything in those 3 areas impact the kids directly, and ours is 72.6. It was 72%-ish last year, and so we kept it at that number, and we want to keep it up there. And you'll see some statistics when it comes to that number on actually how good it is compared to all districts in the whole state. It's really good.
And just for clarification,
Yep.
the audit itself kind of checks to see if you're putting the stuff in the right pot, right?
Yes.
Like that's, so.
Yeah, that
so-
we are totally dependent upon their guidance of districts to make this apples and apples.
So we can't say that you've been putting the stuff in the
No.
wrong pot to make it look better.
No, it can and would get caught. They do look at so much of the coding, but they also, it can be wrong. In 2016, here is an example, our special ed director was put under administration with benefits, with health insurance. I mean, that's a big ticket employee. And it was put under administration. In our coding book that the Auditor General puts out, it says specifically that special ed directors fall under student support. Just by us making that mistake, we increased our admin per pupil by almost $30 per pupil because that one employee was miscoded.
So this audit doesn't find all the mistakes, it
No.
just finds some of them?
Well, this report goes by what we did, and then the auditors are the ones that keep us honest.
Honest. Okay.
We're very honest.
Thank you
I
for
can't
being
speak to others.
honest.
Yes, I'm honest about being
Appreciate it.
honest. Then you get into the non-classroom spending, get into administration. There's 3 areas that are called administration. It's central, governing board level, that would be superintendents, assistant superintendents. Then you get into what's called office of the principal. That is the principal, assistant principal, their admin assistant. And then you get into central services, which is like the business office, grants, human resources. You put all 3 of those together, you get administration. Plant service operations, that's just that. It's working on our buildings and our properties. Food service, self-explanatory. Transportation, same. Those numbers mean nothing unless you have comparisons to others, and that's what we'll get into.
So we push out our custodial services, so that whole amount goes into plant operations?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And we also contract food service. That whole amount goes into food service operations.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Just for viewing pleasures, these are our operational peer groups. Doesn't have the academic peer group on here, just for room, and we're presenting it a little bit different because it's so skewed with that poverty boundary stat that they do. So you can just see operational peer group. That's the area in which we are compared instruction, administration, plant, food service, and then transportation is the one on the right. Humboldt is in our operational peer group. Chino Valley is not, due to size. Okay. All right. Here's how we did compared to our 13 operating peer groups, which are over on the left-hand side, Patsy Junction. So administration, when compared, you can see the state average, the peer average, and what this breaks down is the per pupil amount that we spend on administration compared to our relative peer group. One on the left, we are considered very low in our operating peer group. You can see how many kids per administrative position. Operating plant, we are low as well on square footage, spending per square footage, and then it just goes down. Food service, we're very low. Transportation in both route miles and spending per mile and spending per rider, we're also very low. So in every category that they do compare us, we're either very low or low.
And these are areas we want to be low in, right? There's other areas you're going to show us in a minute that we'd like to be high, and hopefully we're good. Another thing I'll just point out really quickly is with administrative spending per student, Brian's showing us that we're among the lowest in the state of Arizona. It's worth noting that Arizona on administrative spending overall is the lowest in the United States of America, according to the census. So we are the lowest of the low on administrative spending. Somehow there's been a narrative in the community in recent years that our administration in PUSD is top-heavy in terms of spending, and that's simply not the case.
Just a couple of bullet points, because I see all the data for the whole state. First of all, since the 16-17 school year, PUSD has been low or very low in their administrative spending compared to its peers. Just out of the 207 districts that are compared, there's only 25 of them that have a very low administrative spending when compared to their peers. And then also that $997 amount that we spend per peer, that's very low. There's only 17 districts out of 207 that spend less money per pupil than PUSD does, which actually is a surprising number, because the larger you are, there is an economy of size. There is efficiencies. Lincoln is more expensive to run. It only has 2 sections than a Bayajut. One principal, one principal. office. So I was really surprised. The lowest district is 814, and that's Snowflake, in case you wanted to know. And the highest per pupil is actually Peach Springs Unified School District. They spend $14,000 per kid on administration. They probably have 5 kids.
We don't even
I
receive 14,000 per kid here. We're about 10,000 per kid that we receive. So they spend about 50% more than we actually receive per student just on administration. And it's an efficiencies piece, right? It's not that there's people,
I have no idea.
malfeasance up in
Yeah.
Peach Springs. There's only a handful of kids.
Questions on this? Comments? All right, first category was the instructional. This is a graph that just shows where we are in comparison to our peer group. Here, the bigger bars, the better. So this is our 72.6%, and that is our whole budget. It's our operational budget, it's our capital budget, it's the 301 money that teachers get. So our 72.6 in comparison to our peer group, it's the highest. It was last year, and actually it separated from the second a little bit more. We had, I think, one that was in the 70s last year, and they dipped into the 60s. And so these are our operating peer groups, and this was something that I hadn't looked at before. That's 72.6% of the budget in those 3 categories: instruction, student support, instructional support. How did that compare to all the districts? I was really surprised. There's only 9 districts that spend more of their budget than PUSD in those 3 areas,
9 districts of any size.
out of 207.
So when I'm in the community and I present to people about how we spend our money, what I tell them is we don't get a lot of funding from the state, but what we do get, our board allocates to classrooms. It's impacting students directly.
So are most of those districts that have a higher classroom spending larger than PUSD?
I don't know.
Don't know, okay.
I think a couple of them
curious.
were. I didn't look at them carefully. I just rank ordered because I was manipulating.
That's a reasonable
A
guess.
table
just
with
based on economy
207
scale, but,
Wondering
yeah.
what
Yeah.
economy of scale.
I can dive that deeper if you want me to.
So you said that in this category, we're reporting our 301 money is in this category?
Yes.
And yet, when we were, later on, you're going to calculate teacher pay.
301 money's in that too.
Okay.
The only thing that's in that teacher pay is 301 money on their salary. So
Okay.
this is literally every single dollar, every pencil we buy. If it's for the principal, it's coded to administration. If it's for the classroom, it's coded to instruction. Every book, electricity, every expenditure is put into categories, and here's how we stack up in those top 3 that affect the kids the most.
This is something to be super proud of. When we talk with our community, how do you want your tax dollars spent? Nobody says spend it on transportation. It's important. Nobody says spend it on buildings. That's important. Nobody says spend it on administration. All that's important. They say spend it on the classroom. And there really isn't a district our size in the state of Arizona that does a better job of that by a substantial portion. We're pretty proud of this. This is kind of cool.
It is, it's very good.
Yeah, it's good.
Where, the extra money we give to teachers for coaching and covering
Clubs.
periods and stuff, is it in
It's in this.
this category?
Yep.
Still in this category?
Still in this category.
For every district, correct?
For every district. Yeah. There's seminars on coding. It's important that we code this similarly, otherwise these things don't matter or anything. It's kind of like tests. You know, we may agree with them, we may disagree with cut scores. It's until you compare everybody who's on the even playing field on, is 72.6 good? Well, these are our folks that we're being compared to. I would think, yes, it is.
72.6 is a C. That's terrible, Brian.
But no, I think it's pretty good considering it's all of our money.
Maybe
that
I'm
we spend in
misinterpreting
the
that.
whole district, so. Anyway. All right, so when it comes to, oh no, how did that get on there twice?
That's all right. Just talk about it once.
Okay. So I did get to, when it comes to the spending per pupil on administration, because that is an even playing field. You have how much you spend in administration, you divide by how many kids you have. That's just an even. You have administration spending, kids money, or number of kids. And so this was the Tri-City area and our schools that fall in Prescott's boundaries. Where are they in administration spending per pupil? Charter schools do have to do annual financial reports. They do have to break it into those 3 categories that I mentioned that are administration, and they get funded per pupil. So I just took their annual financial reports, divided by the number of kids in those 3 areas, and here's where we stack up. Clark, I'll let you speak a little bit more to this slide.
Yeah, just real quickly, because we're already in like minute 15 of a really good conversation here. But you can see the 3 local school districts, and we're the best of the 3 local school districts. And then, like Brian said, all of the charter schools that are within PUSD's boundaries are also on this graph. And we're substantially more efficient in terms of our administrative spending than anybody around us.
All right, moving on. Same slide. Any questions the second time around? There was actually a different slide in here, but we'll pass it. All right, here's our state assessment data. We did have this like on 5 slides. I condensed it down to 1. Essentially what this does is it shows at the top the number of students that passed, or I'm sorry, the passing percentage of PUSD in each of our 3 tested areas, ELA, math, and science, where we rank with that percentage and the whole, out of all districts that actually have reportable data on it. So, math, we ranked 38th out of 202 districts that had score. 38% passing in math was the 38th best out of all districts in Arizona. That puts us in the 18th percentile. ELA, we're in the 14th percentile. In other words, to put it, 85% of the districts' average score was worse than what PUSD. We were better, and only 14% were better than us. Science, we're in the 22nd percentile.
One of the things I point out for folks when we see this is that we made a big jump in math from the previous year. We were in the 24th percentile, which is still pretty good, but not great for math the previous year. But compared to other districts, we made a substantial jump this last year. And I'm hoping we're getting some traction on math, and we'll see that going forward as well. That's a big area of emphasis for us, as you know.
Are we seeing that we're moving up, but are we also seeing statewide that the percentages are also going up, at least the scores?
As far as the raw test scores, yes.
Okay, so we're not just, it's not just that we're improving, but everybody else is improving, and then we're improving along.
Yeah, as we come out of COVID, that's the general trend for school districts statewide, is that the raw scores are going up just a little bit.
Yeah.
And yeah, we're improving a little bit more than other districts around us.
That's great, thanks.
And then the bottom graph is what we condensed from about 4 graphs down into 1. Essentially, it's showing the percent passing in both in PUSD, Chino Valley, Humboldt. It has a state average, but it also, I put the average for the 2 peer groups for cities. Once again, it's based by poverty. For cities that have 13 or less, that's us, the average of those scores are the last one, the blue. So 48% of our peer group passed ELA, while we were at 38. Then again, that is also including districts that have only a 3% poverty rate. There's a few out there.
That's your Paradise Valleys, your Scottsdales, your
and we're in the middle of that pack. I mean, the last year we put all of those peer groups in a row and looked at, we're right in the middle on how our kids did in that peer group.
So is this your group that you came up with, or is this the operational group that was made up by the
state's comparative peer group?
Okay, great. Thank you.
So I also put the average of the group that Humboldt falls in, because their poverty rate is higher, and that's this orange one here. And look at the difference. That poverty, cities, one is higher poverty, one is less. One group had 48% passing the ELA test, the other group had 27. If we were in the higher poverty group, every single one of our tests, the passing would have been the highest in that peer group.
If we had 1%
If we had
poverty in
yes.
Prescott broadly?
If we had 1% more poverty in our residents in our boundary, we would have been in the other group, and we would have been the highest achieving district in all 3 tests in that group. We're middle of the pack in the other group, and you can see just the discrepancy in how the students do. Questions on this?
I have a point, Brian.
Yes, Andy?
So, 2 things. Do these take into account, I don't see any ACT data in this. Is that correct?
Yeah, good question, Andy. This does include our ACT data. This is our aggregate data for all of our math scores together, grades 3 through 11, all of our ELA data together, 3 through 11, and science, same thing, 3 through 11. So it includes the ACE test, the Arizona Sci test, and the ACT and ACT Aspire test for each of those subject areas.
Okay, so this is not taking our ACT scores as an aggregate to compare against other districts.
Not separately, right? It's not disaggregated here. It's all of our scores together is what's being
All
shown on this
students,
chart.
Okay.
all scores, only by subjects the difference.
For every one of the districts we're looking at, same thing.
Right. The other thing is, and this is just a personal thing, but I bristle when you talk about percent passing when the test measures proficiency. And there's a real difference between proficiency and passing in public view. We're not talking about a 60% score as a passing score or a 70% score as a passing score. We're talking, they're testing for proficiency, which has a whole different definition. And I think we need to have that discussion. It just bothers me that they say percent passing when it isn't a measure of passing grades in the traditional sense. So I just want to make that point.
That's a really good point.
It is a good point. And the words we use, help, perception, or hurt. And I think I said passing too. All right, this slide will make Joe Howard very sad because his last year as superintendent, he was, yay, Prescott's teachers are above the state average. That was 2 years ago, now we're not again.
So why are we not?
Take a look.
I don't know. I will tell you this. I question this data, and the reason being is that the way that the accounting code works, you cannot discern between a teacher doing clubs or tutoring or sports than their pay. It's all coded to the same. This average teacher pay is only supposed to be their contract, things that go directly to their classroom performance, like if they had a hard-to-fill bonus or a stipend because it's a difficult self-contained class, and their classroom site fund, their 301 money. That's the only thing that should go in here. But the problem is up until this year, they made us, all the coding is the same. To get this, they actually made us I had to take a teacher, take all of their pay, and manually take out what they made as a coach, what they made as for a club, for our 200 teachers. I can't imagine a Scottsdale, a Mesa doing this. Literally, this is a manipulation of our accounting records, and here is where there is not a way to know exactly how accurate it was, except for I can tell you ours was.
Ours is accurate.
Because it took me it took me a month and a half with the Auditor General to get it where they accepted the data because they kept throwing it back and saying, I don't think it's accurate enough.
So let me make sure I understand what you're saying. Are you saying on this graph that we don't know whether the coaches and the clubs and those kind of monetary
Ours
figures-
does not.
Ours does not. But we're not sure about the red
No,
line.
it was
Yeah, the
just a
state
pure,
has changed the way that we're supposed to report, whether every district picked up on that and did it
So that
accurately,
could
we
make
can't
quite a
tell,
bit of a
but.
difference.
Yeah,
I
there's
had to take $12 million and separate it into pots when there wasn't anything except for like a description
Right.
saying
Okay.
club. And I had to do that with 200 employees for $11 million. To do that for 1,000 teachers and a $100 million budget, I don't know. Now we have to code every single job duty differently, so a club is coded differently than their classroom pay. So next year,
It will look different.
it'll look different, and I'll be interested. How the state went up $3,000 when we gave what did we give last year, a 5% raise?
Yeah.
It's a 4% raise? I just don't know, except for I just question the comparison. So
Interesting.
this is what you see on the Auditor General spending report. It's just a different way. It shows our average pay here. This is the state's the line, and you can see last year we were right above it, and this year now we're not. The dark at the bottom is the 301 money that the teachers get, and the jump 2 years ago is when we said all of the 301s going to the teachers. We're taking anything that is eligible expense, not teacher compensation, out of 301, and that's why that black is bigger. And takes us to the questions. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Brian. All right. Moving on to item 7A1, Superintendent, Current Events, Mr. Tenney.
Okay, I'll try to go quick. Go ahead, Sarah, to the next slide here. Had a number of kind of cool things that happened recently. There's an annual event where our baseball team, our varsity baseball team, plays against a team of kids that they call themselves the Challenger Team. It's kids who have different physical or intellectual disabilities. There's Ava right in the middle there. You can see her in her jersey. She's one of the terrific kids in town who help out and support that team and help coach them and whatnot. It was so fun. I spent an hour and a half, probably the best hour and a half I've spent in the last month, watching those kids out on the field, just having a terrific time. And I loved how classy our varsity baseball player boys were, how they helped kids get to base and ran along with them and cheered each other on. It was just a neat thing. I almost don't care what our test scores are if we've got kids doing stuff like this. It was pretty neat. We've had a couple of different challenge coin recipients recently. One was our some folks from our grants department, our finance department, who helped Brian with a reporting piece that I won't go into great detail, but at any rate, we had something that we needed to fix at the last minute in order to submit a report for to be eligible for a grant. And these folks all stepped up and said, we'll do that. So there's a picture of Mr. Freyer, Mr. Goligoski, with our recipients of that challenge coin. And then later on that month, Mr. Freyer had nominated Ms. Torres for a challenge coin. All the great things that she does for our district and for our board and to help keep us organized. So there's a picture of her getting that. Really quick, we don't usually do this, but we're going to do one more challenge coin. It's super quick, and it is for our friend Brian Moore. Would you like me to read this? How do you want to go about this?
Yeah, and then I'll do the coin presentation.
Okay,
All right,
super. Now, Brian's presentation was too long, and that's not what he's getting the challenge coin for. He's getting it for something else. This is another situation that if you didn't get a feel from this last presentation of how complex it is to report everything just right, you talk with Brian for another half an hour, and your head will explode. It's super, super hard. And so with the literally tens of thousands of pieces of data, that we have to input over the course of the year, most everything gets put in the right way. Sometimes it doesn't, and we make a fix. Sometimes we find, ooh, that wasn't put in the right way by this person, and there was something that actually cost us a lot of money. We were reporting special education coding in a way different than we should have. We got with the ADE, we said, can we do this different going forward? They said, absolutely you can. We said, can we fix that for this year and last year? And they said, absolutely you cannot. We said, you're kidding me. We'll lose out on $180,000 to $200,000 if we can't make this fix for this year. Anyhow, Brian went to bat for us, and I won't go into great detail, but he got them to change their mind. And so we're going to have coming to us in the relatively near future about $180,000 worth of funding for our special education students that we would not have had if Brian hadn't figured out what the problem was, figured out what the solution was, brought the resources to bear, and gotten with the Department of Education. So I've written up a little thing that basically says that, but I just want to thank Brian for that and recognize him, and I think we've got a challenge coin for him.
You bet. So if you don't know the history of the challenge coin, it started in World War I, when there's a French term called esprit de corps, which basically means fellowship. And soldiers have been using it since really World War I. Now we have firefighters and we have police officers. A lot of businesses use it as just a token for appreciation and really just sharing that fellowship. So these challenge coins are near and dear to all of our hearts here. And this is the governing board challenge coin that says, "Thank you, you made a difference." So Brian Moore, you made a difference.
Finally.
Jenny American in our ESS department, our admin assistant there, did a bunch of work with him as well. That is Brian finding the issue, figuring out how to fix the issue, and then going to bat in some pretty spectacular ways.
It was a miracle.
And for some place like Mesa, $200,000, okay, that's a rounding error. For us, it is not. It's a big deal. A district as small as ours to have recouping of funds that way will make a difference for
Well,
our kids.
we spend $2 million more on special ed than we get funding. So 200,000 is like, we just recoup 10% of the money that we don't receive in funding for special ed in the area we should. So,
Thanks, team.
thank you very much, Mr. Tenney. That means a lot.
You bet. Thank you, Brian.
All right, moving on to 7A2. Oh, wait,
Real quick thing, sorry. Yep.
sorry.
Next thing. A lot of people have asked how our student safety officer program is going. So that's the grant that we've received from the state that allows us to bring in off-duty police officers to each of our campuses that don't have a designated and assigned student resource officer, full-time police officer, Mile High, and the high school have that. This is one example of some thank you notes that our Abaya Judd kids wrote to our police officers. I think you could read it there. It says, "Thank you for," oh shoot, can you read that?
Karen.
"Thank you for coming to our school and spending time in our classroom. We think you are so brave. I love it when you are at recess." Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Where you are at recess. It's not only far away and a little small, but we've got developmental spelling going on too. "I love it when you're at recess with us. We love it when you come to our school, and I appreciate the hard work. Sincerely, Melanie W." Super cool. Our kids have such positive interactions with these guys. The idea for these men and women who are there to protect our school is if, in the very unlikely event that we really did have a security threat at the school when they were there. That's the main idea. Since that is not happening, we're really, really glad that there's other things they can do as well. They just help us all to have peace of mind and they interact with kids in a real positive way. This is a good example of how the kids feel about that. So wanted to report that to you. And then the last thing, as you know, just yesterday, seems like a long time ago, there was an eclipse, and I don't think anybody burned their retinas, but we had kids at every school that were doing science learning around this. We had a set of, the classes available for every one of the kids at the high school, and I know at several of our other schools as well. It was a pretty neat day that we could spend, 25 minutes focusing on some neat science in the real world. That's all I got.
All right, great, thank you. Item 7A2, governing board members. You have any current events or things to share?
I have one that I want to share. For those of you that don't know, I'm also on the board of the Education Foundation. And last Tuesday, a week ago today, several of us on the board, Carol Yetman, Ginger Nolte, and myself, went and videotaped what we call our Rising Stars. And each year, teachers nominate a senior at PHS, who in turn then nominates a teacher. I can see some teachers out there have won it already. Who then nominates a teacher that has made.
Do you want to share who they were?
Oh, I wasn't going to yet, but I could do that. You do that when we get there. But what I wanted to talk about in particular was that when we videotaped last Tuesday, the students got to express their gratitude and their reasons for the teachers that they chose in PUSD to honor when we did the Rising Stars banquet. And Carol and Ginger and I were both a little bit overwhelmed at the end because we hear so much about the awful things that kids do these days. The kids that are not performing, the kids that are on drugs, the kids that are on alcohol, the kids that are committing crime. And what we felt when we left that day, and these are kids, the Rising Stars are kids that have overcome obstacles of some sort. They might not be your 4.78 grade point average. They might be not the star athletes, but they're the kids that are, most of us would say, these are normal kids that have overcome some burdens and made it. we felt after listening to these kids and videotaping these kids, all three of us went home thinking, our world's going to be just fine. These kids can lead us into the future, and if this is what the normal kid at PHS looks like, then we're going to be just fine. And that's how we felt. And I don't know if you want to mention their names or.
Go for it.
We have got our rising stars. I have a list. Were you going to, did I take your thunder away? No, you do this part.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, great segue.
I don't want to steal
So-
his thunder.
So just so you know, we did have the Rising Stars that we're recognizing are Cheryl Ann Volmer, and she recognized Miss Lee, who does a lot of work with mock trial in our government classes. Raina Houston and Miss Hawley. I think Miss Hawley is chosen every year, I believe. Gwyneth Fellow and Miss Ryan, who was my high school counselor, so she's still doing wonderful things. Megan Dockhausen and Miss Johnson, and Megan is that 4.738 grade point average person and 4-year awardee for band, right? I think first in history for PHS. Seth Peters and Miss Wanamaker, Adeline O'Farrell and Miss Moore or Mr. Moore. Anya Booth and Miss Tomlin, and Wyatt Rewerts and Miss Ryan, or Mr. Ryan. Right. I do have some other events that I want to talk about. We did attend, Mr. Tenney, Mr. Neely, and I, the Lions 4.0 banquet. Kevin was there representing as well. We had a large contingent of 4.0 students from Prescott High School. Very well attended, and Judge Napper was the keynote speaker, delivered an amazing keynote speech. I do want to mention also the Kiwanis auction that occurred this last year. It's 100 years that the Kiwanis have been providing, all their funds, 100% of their funds go back to kids' initiatives in the community. And so they started out with an auction doing chickens and lamb and everything else for many years, and now they're raising several hundreds of thousands of dollars, and again, every single penny goes to kids' initiatives, and we really do get a benefit from that with our schools every single year. I also want to note that the PHS Air Force JROTC, they did repaint the ticket booth, the snack bar, and the bathrooms at the baseball field. But I also saw them Saturday on the Granite Mountain Trail or the Granite Creek Trail, picking up litter on a snowy Saturday morning when we were playing flag football with our own boys. 5 and 7, and just amazing event. So it's great to see them out in the community. We did have, if you don't know, there is a club called the Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America for PHS, and they brought home state conference awards and a national award as well. I think that was in job interview. So second year national qualifier in job interview was Riley King, and gold medal there as well. And then we also took a state award from Ellie Normandy, who won the Region 7 Courtroom Artist Contest for the Arizona State Mock Trial Tournament. So amazing things going on within our schools. But, and then how about Adam Gray, who won a $1,000 scholarship to the Sons of the Union Veterans of the Civil War. And then R.J. Parra is signing for, which is a great softball pitcher. She's signing to Weber State, so that was in the paper and made our local news. So kids doing great things.
Go Wildcats.
Go Wildcats, that's right. All right, we're going to start on item 7A3. Oh, did you have something, Linda? I'm sorry.
I just wanted to say, the Kiwanis auction is online now, and they do have a lot of really great prizes, and they've done everything from doing the gardens at the different schools, and they really are involved with everything children. It's really incredible. So that's a big deal every year they do that auction.
For sure. All right, Andy, do you have anything besides an announcement? Do you want to make a personal announcement at all? While you're not here?
Well, yeah, I'm sorry I'm not at the meeting tonight. I am with my 5-day-old baby granddaughter.
Hey.
And so we are getting to know her and trying to train her up right.
Well done. Thanks, Andy. All right.
Yeah,
Then
thank you.
You bet. I'll move on to item 7A3, governing board student representatives. We'll start with you, Ava.
So we were just talking about the ACT. We have the ACT and ACT Aspire test tomorrow for freshmen and juniors. We had ASVAB testing pretty recently too. Prescott High School has a color dance tomorrow. A bunch of spring sports are heading into playoffs within the next few weeks, wrapping up their regular season. There are Special Olympics today, and a lot of our students performed very, very well. Several PHS students placed in the PCA Visual Arts Competition, which provides scholarships for artists, and PHS Drama Department opens their production at the end of the month.
Nice.
All right, Kevin.
Yeah. Okay. So I know that there's a lot of testing, but also it's this time of year when AP testing and like preparation for that begins to ramp up, and so by the time of the next school board meeting, we'll be in the thick of that. And then also there's I don't know what the right word is, but like there's the Lions Club meeting that happened. There's like all these end of year kind of awards and things going out, and then with that also comes for the whole high school the like registration for next year's classes and picking that out. And then I think most excitingly in that department, a lot of the seniors now know at least where they've been accepted to and are now committing to colleges. So I don't want to like pin anybody down, but I know a Naval Academy out there.
That's great.
There's some kids heading to like Fordham, I think a TCU, a Clemson, and maybe I want to say a U of O out there. So yeah, Baylor. There you go.
And
BYU.
Columbia.
I've heard BYU. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
BYU.
So that's an exciting time and the end goal of some education. So yeah. And then also, I don't know, on a more fun note, we have like Senior Assassin going on right now through the school. And so yeah, there's some commitment. Not through the school. You're right. Not through the school, but just thoroughly participated in with Prescott High School students. Yeah. But to be clear, the school holds no liability to the any student actions. But yes.
Do you want to explain the game here, Mr. Tenney?
No, I don't want to do
Okay.
that. Thanks for that. No, it's a game. I think that's the little whatever. That
Yes,
people have been,
exactly.
what do you call those?
Floaties.
There's a little thing where kids go around. Are you using squirt guns still? Like you
Yeah,
did?
yeah.
Okay.
That's. I mean, do you want me to, as a
Give us the
first-hand,
30-second
yeah,
version.
Love to.
Like a massive water gun fight till graduation.
Yeah.
Out in the
much.
community, outside of school hours, and outside of school property.
Exactly.
Thanks, Kevin. That's awesome.
Of course.
Yeah, it's a fun thing for kids as long as they do it safely, and they have been for the most part.
Yeah, great tradition. Actually. Yeah. All right, moving on to item 8, action items. 8A, consent agenda. Are there any items that anybody would like to poll or recognize? Okay. I do want to recognize item 8A2, and that's the donations that have been given out for this month, or received this month. We received a donation from Haley Construction. Items donated was a construction fence for $2,000, value of $2,000 for construction of a handicap accessible merry-go-round at Taylor Hicks. A donation from Zebrascapes, wood chips for $4,000 for the handicap accessible merry-go-round at Taylor Hicks. A donation from A&B Signs for labor and materials for $1,000 to construct 2 billboard signs at PHS and Abaya Judd. A donation from Donna Norris. Item donated was a ceramic wheel for $1,500 to PHS. A donation from Granite Mountain PTO, a check in the amount of $138.24 to the choir program. And a donation from William Haas, a check in the amount of $420 to the PHS band.
Can I ask Andy, I was surprised at how many end-of-year retirements we had. How is the staffing for next year?
Great question.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you're referring specifically to retirements or retirements and resignations, but there's a lot, right?
Yeah, there were.
Right, so there's, that kind of represents everybody who's either notified us or, not returned to contract. Right now, we were just looking at the numbers. We're at right about 14% of our teachers who are not
coming
returning.
back.
So that ratio, that rate is not, ideal, but it's actually pretty good compared to the rest of the state. Looking at, again, kind of like Brian was saying, comparatively, there's a lot of different ways to measure turnover, but the state on average is somewhere in the 20 to 25% range is what I'm seeing. And so we don't have numbers yet for this year statewide, but for us, yeah, we're right about 14%. So again,
Have those
that's what
positions been listed already on the website?
they've not only
as-
been listed, we're down, I gotta give a shout out to all our principals who are just working really hard right now to fill those. We're down, let me see, I think we're down to 7 positions, teacher positions right now that are remaining open.
How
So,
many?
um,
I did-
7.
7, yeah.
There's only 7 left, yeah.
7 that we
pretty
were still
remarkable.
looking for. So yeah, percentage-wise, it was about 40 overall, and now we're down to 7. So we've been filling those pretty
Great job.
successfully, yeah.
I'd be interested in seeing the results of the exit surveys, please.
Absolutely. The plan right now is that we're going to be sending those out later this month for everyone who's, going to be leaving at the end of the year, and we'll combine that also with results from this past year.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And just for everybody's awareness, Sarah, if we'd marked that as consent agenda item 8A1, so we can reference it, so we're not talking out of.
Yeah, the personnel report is the reference here. Good.
Great. Thanks, everybody. All right, anything else? That's great. All right, now we're going to move on to item 8.
I'd like to propose that we,
Oh, jeez, hang on, hold on.
whatever I'm saying,
right. Probably
consider
vote on the
approving the
consent agenda.
consent agenda as
Thank you.
presented.
Right, so
Second.
we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. The item 8A consent agenda passes. Thanks, Cara.
You're welcome.
Item 8B, study and voting session. Do we have any call the public at all, or request to speak? Okay, move on. Going to go on to item 8B1. Consider taking action to temporarily suspend the district's restriction against the presence and consumption of alcohol on district grounds, specifically Prescott Mile High Middle School, football field, and track area. Michelle.
Good evening. I'm Michelle Stacy Schroeder with City of Prescott Recreation Services. Since 2016, we have created a partnership with PUSD for the use of Mile High Middle School under the supervision of the City of Prescott for special events. One of the big major factors was we were able to do events in the downtown area, bring more people downtown, and not have to close streets and impact traffic. Generally speaking, for 2016 to about 2019, we averaged 5 to 6 events at Mile High, and each event, the majority of them had alcohol with it. There's a $1,500 flat fee that the promoter has to pay to the school district on top of the rental fees. So it brought in a lot of money for the school district. In 2020 with COVID, those numbers have dwindled down. I think just 2 years ago, we had 4 events. Last year, we had 3. This year, we only have 2. There's also other factors that take into consideration why the events have decreased at Mile High. It has nothing to do with the facilities. It has to do with noise complaints in the downtown area, specifically around the middle school and how the sound carries. And just, a lot of nonprofits that do these events, they don't have the volunteer capacity that they used to have prior to COVID. And so that prevents them from putting on those events. So I'm here to submit a request for 2 events at Mile High Middle School, one in June and one in August. Both events benefit the Prescott Area Scouting Organization. The way that works is the liquor license, it goes through the city of Prescott and then the Arizona Department of Liquor, and the nonprofit gets 25% and the promoter gets 75%, but it's going back to kids in general. Both of these events are for 21 and over. They have decreased their time frame, so it's earlier in the day as opposed to later in the night, which helps with the noise complaints that we get. But on top of that, we also have other events that use Mile High, and the school district recoups money for that. And those include like the craft fair. Craft fair's down in the square. The vendors park over there, so they're not taking up city parking spots. Overall, there's about $7,500 this year that will be coming back to the school district from these events. So, any questions for me?
You answered all of my questions, so thank you.
The $7,500, does that include the $1,500 payment up front?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. The average time frame for the events is about 4 hours, and then they have a little setup time and a little cleanup time. And so that's all inclusive in that. And Mr. Tenney can attest to how well the city vets these applications and these events. When he served as a council person, he was our council liaison. So he knows that we're very strict with the event promoters about the no smoking on school property. They have to be at least 20 feet away from the entrances of the school to designate a smoking section, so there's no smoking on campus. And the city provides a staff person to be there throughout the event to make sure that there's, in case of inclement weather, which we had a few years ago, no driving of the golf carts on the grass and tearing up the grass. We work real closely with Mr. Chartier and with Mr. Moody for the irrigation and stuff like that. They go out and mark the lines. So we're very protective of your property because we want to keep bringing events back and bring that money back to you guys.
Yeah. And Michelle, just for everybody's clarification, one, the June 15th, obviously we're in summer break. August 17th, school is in session, but it's a Saturday, right? So
correct. Both events are on Saturdays. If they're going to do any setup on Friday evening, it will be well after school is out for the day.
excellent. And then you do, and you provide 2 certified Arizona law enforcement officers as well.
Yes, any event with alcohol has to have 2 off-duty officers present at all times.
Great, thank you. All right. If there's no other questions, I'll consider a motion to consider taking action to temporarily suspend the district's restriction against the presence and consumption of alcohol on district grounds, specifically Prescott Mile High Middle School, football field, and track area.
So moved.
There's a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Motion is seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
Andy, did you vote?
Yes, I did. I voted aye.
Thank you.
All right, item 8B2, consider approving service trips to Kenya and Mexico as part of the Interact District 5495 Ambassador Program. We have Kathleen Cherry here.
Hello, everybody. First of all, this is such a great opportunity for our students. This ambassador program is unique in all the world, I am told. It's the only Interact ambassador program that exists worldwide. This is the 7th year that the district has sent students to Kenya, and this will be the 3rd year we're sending students to Mexico. We have our 6th ambassador to Kenya this year and our 4th ambassador to Mexico. And I'll be going on the Mexico trip this year. So, and you have the dates there. So the Mexico trip is June 18th through the 27th. And then the Kenya trip is June 26th through July 9th. This is mostly sponsored by Rotary, the entire district of Rotary, which is like essentially northern Arizona. But our kids are doing a lot of fundraising and making contributions in various ways. So a pretty big deal. Any questions?
Do you have any questions for Ms. Cherry?
No, I thought it looked fabulous.
Is it, I'm sorry, I did not read the itinerary. Is it through a company, or is it
It's
just prepared through the Rotary?
It's completely through Rotary, and we are hosted by Rotarians in both countries. Rotarians are with us every step of the way. They ride on the buses with us. They pick us up at the airport. In some cases, they, will feed us dinner at their home, things like that. So they are with us 24 hours a day while we're there.
Clarifying question. Can you remind us what these trips are for? I know you've done this in the past, but we might have some folks in the audience that are these kids going to play soccer? Or
Oh, yes.
what are they headed there for?
The purpose of the trip.
Yeah.
The purpose of the trip is to distribute used mobility devices to people with various disabilities. So we collect wheelchairs, walkers, crutches. The Rotary pays for those to be shipped in a huge shipping container, both to Mexico and to Kenya. As you can imagine, that is incredibly expensive, but these types of devices they're not available in those countries. And here in the US, we throw them away. So this was kind of the brainchild of a polio survivor out of Colorado to collect these devices and ship them to people in developing countries. And so that's the main goal of both trips. And there are various other projects that we work on as well. For example, on the Kenya trip, we visited several schools, we planted trees. Before we leave, we collect things like school supplies, soccer balls, we deliver those as well. So it's all, it's all about what can we bring to provide that is difficult to come by or non-existent in those places. And then just, making these friendships and connections in both countries, so.
It is super cool. I love the service element of this. And your kids and your club throughout the year help to collect those crutches and walkers and wheelchairs and do fundraising and all sorts of neat things. And this is kind of the culmination of their efforts to be able to present
Exactly,
it
yes.
to people who don't have as many advantages as we do in the United States. I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and there's kind of an interview portion of this too. Not everybody just who signs up for it gets to go.
That's correct,
right?
yes. Yeah, there's an interview, they have to write a couple essays. There's a panel including Rotarians. I was involved with the interview panel the last 2 years. Obviously their parents sign off on it. We have parent meetings, that kind of thing. And then it's kind of a neat situation this year because I think we have 10 total ambassadors, one for Kenya from Prescott High School, one for Mexico from Prescott High School, but I think we have like 8 different high schools in the area, in the district represented. So they get to meet kids from other schools and then travel together. It's really an incredible experience for them.
Pretty neat. Great.
So there's 5 from our school?
No, 5 from the Interact District of Northern Arizona.
Oh,
For each team, and one Prescott High School student on each team this year.
okay. Yeah, I just want to, is there a, okay, never mind. I'm not even going to ask. Nope, I'm good.
I have a question.
Yes.
Are you still collecting? Are those?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so, and then they're stored where? Can people make donations?
Yes, absolutely. Here in the Prescott area, you can take them to Ponderosa Mini Storage, which is on 6th Street near Foxworth Galbraith. And Ron Williams is, he's a Rotarian, and he allows us to use a huge room there. And then from there, they're packaged when it reaches capacity and sent off to wherever they need to be.
And what is the deadline for that?
For accepting those, we do a year round, so.
So it's still going,
it's
and then it
ongoing.
will deadline
Yeah, as soon as they have enough to.
in June?
Well,
Or,
as soon as they have enough to fill a container, they'll ship it.
oh,
So the ones that we will personally be distributing on these 2 trips, they have already left. They are on their way, but we're already collecting for
next,
future. Yeah.
okay.
Any other
The only thing
questions?
I was going to ask are the initials ALEM,
Oh,
which I
so-
see over and over. It's a,
Okay, so that is specific to the Mexico trip.
okay.
I'm not sure what that stands for.
Okay.
It's a Spanish acronym.
Okay.
But ALEM is a group of wheelchair expert repair people who are all wheelchair bound. And they travel throughout southern Mexico, visiting communities and helping people repair, refurbish, or even receive their first wheelchair. And so we'll be working with those, with that organization right at the beginning of the Mexico trip, and then also at the end, because we'll be in 2 locations, and that group will be in both as well.
Thank you.
What kind of equipment are they in need of still? I mean, you
Oh,
get
gosh.
like 1 million walkers, I'm sure.
Yeah,
and-
and a lot of crutches. I would say the thing that we are most in need of are wheelchairs for kids,
Yeah,
because, you know, unfortunately, there are still a lot of children in these places who have even polio. And so, you know, a large wheelchair is too big, or crutches are not appropriate, so children's wheelchairs, which
so we
aren't
could
super
put it
common.
out to churches.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
And to everybody that, you know, to go ahead
Yeah,
and,
physical therapy
donate,
places,
yeah.
places like that.
okay.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions from one of our 2 Fulbright scholars in the room here? Anyway, we'll move on. We'll move on to the motion. I consider adopting, nope, we're not doing that one. Let's consider approving the service trips to Kenya and Mexico as part of the Interact District 5495 Ambassador Program. We'll take a motion.
And I will make a motion to approve that.
Any second?
Second,
A motion is second. All in favor?
aye.
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 No opposed. Motion passes. Thanks, Kathleen.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item 8B3, consider adopting the proposed changes in ASBA Policy Advisory 764-773 and 775-786 from February 2024. Mr. Binder.
All right, yeah, so you may remember last month I brought you 24 policies that ASBA is recommending we make some revisions to. I explained last month that most of these, if not all of them, are pretty minor. None of them have a lot of content changes. They're changing some terminology that's used, kind of updating things based on updated laws. So for the most part, those are all kind of updated with these recommendations. I am pulling 2 off, so we're down to 22 at this point based on some feedback that we received. So I'll talk about what those 2 are, and we'll share those in just a few minutes. But of the 22 remaining, I'm happy to answer any questions about anything that you may have questions about.
Well, I've been trying to go through them this weekend, and
Okay.
there's some that I would like to meet with you in private instead of,
Okay.
you know, having them. Otherwise, I wanted to pool the whole packet. I don't think that's necessary. I don't know the ones you're pulling, but I have questions on
The
a whole.
2 that I'm pulling that are in the next section are B, E, D, B,
Okay,
and that relates to the agenda, the board agenda. And then GBEF, which relates to staff use of digital communications.
Okay. You're not pulling the school security plan, or?
Can you tell me which number that is?
Yeah, it is. Okay, there's one on graduation requirements.
I mean, I can tell you that that was not one of the two that we were planning to pull.
Okay.
I'm happy to, once you kind of identify which one it is.
Student interrogations, searches and arrests.
Let me see which one that
But
was.
the one I wanted to talk to you about was parental involvement in education, which is KB-EB.
Okay, if you're looking at the revision, I think it's listed as 766.
The exhibit, yeah.
Yeah, that one related to, there was a change in state law in terms of what is required in terms of parental surveys. And so what the change is, it's taking it out of one policy, but it's still in a different policy, KB, that still says that the district should be, getting parent feedback on school improvement.
Okay. That doesn't have anything to do with the one on parent rights, or?
Again, which one? Yeah.
Andy.
This
me
is
see,
why
there's
we
a
did
lot-
the first read a month ago,
Yeah.
so you'd have plenty of time to get with Andy over the last month if you needed to.
So you're saying you don't want me to do this?
No, not at all. What I'm saying is that our mode, every time that we are looking at changing any policy, is that we do a first read, 1 month, and then any board members who have any questions at all have an entire month to get with Mr. Binder or myself to ask questions and whatnot, and it.
Right, and
and-
that's what I've been going over them so that
it's
I could
atypical.
find them.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is it's atypical to come to the board meeting and say, I have questions at this point, and I'd like to push this off another month. We could do that if the board wants to do that, if we have a majority of folks who want to table it, but that's why we had an entire month to look over this, in case, anybody had any questions about it. And
It's such a wide range of them.
is.
I've
It
been
is. There's a
trying
lot
to
this
do
time.
that all month. And not all month, I can't say all month. Couple weeks, I've been trying to go through them, and I didn't get through all of them, so I don't know the ones. So do I make a motion then to defer it to
Yeah, to
the
table this.
next meeting?
Is there any one particular one that you're
I
concerned
can't
about?
find it.
Because we could
I don't recall.
try and move.
Sorry.
I would just say if we could try and move as many of the policies from that second reading that we've had a chance to
Well,
go
I'd have
over.
to have
But I do want to
recess
recognize
or
those.
something then.
So just for clarification, we're just voting on the strikeouts and the additions.
Correct. Yep.
If we disagree with the policy itself, that would be something different.
Yeah, exactly. None of these policies are new. They've been in our board
They're
policies
in there.
for years.
Yeah.
And as Andy has mentioned, the only changes that are here, aside from the ones that he's pointed out to you last month and this month, that they're mostly clerical things. Taking out the word, as we're talking about technology examples, taking out the word BlackBerry because nobody has that anymore.
Yeah.
Taking out the word Twitter because it's not Twitter anymore, it's
Yeah.
X. There's
Yeah.
really nothing substantive.
Right, and if there was something that, when you review through them later, that you wanted to come back and talk with me about, and we wanted to bring that individual policy back to the board, we certainly could do that.
Absolutely, so absolutely, there's multiple options here. We could table the entire thing. If you know exactly which ones you have questions or concerns with still, you could table those, and we could go forward with the others, or we could have a vote on these, see if there's a majority of people in favor of adopting them, and then always, with any of our policies, if there's a concern that a board member brings up and two other people agree, then that can be changed any month. So none of these are etched in stone forever. They become our policy until we have 3 board members who say, I want to do it different. So any of those options is open to you, Linda.
I don't know which ones they are.
Okay.
Yeah, it's hard for us because it's not like we all sat down and read all the policies. I actually started, and I made it through like 2 pages, and then I'm like, I don't really care what lot we're on, and I don't really care that we have, you know? So every time we bring them, it's like we're reading them for the first time, and I say that's a bad thing, being the board member, not knowing what all our policies are.
When we've set policy, yeah.
But, yeah, it's like we're reading it for the first time, but we have to I guess I have to understand that we're just changing the crossouts and the policy's already been accepted. If we want to change it, we have to bring it back.
Bring it back.
So you can approach it however you want. Good points, all excellent points. And one of the points that's embedded in what you're saying is this volunteer job that you do isn't always very exciting. Sometimes there's some shoulder shrugging or some work, one or the other, to it.
I was busy reading my chapter book.
So did you have two,
That was
though,
pretty
that you
long.
wanted to talk to us about now?
We have to go.
That's the next.
These are the two.
There's a couple others that we'll be doing a first read on some.
Got it.
Yeah.
some
So
amended.
this would be a vote on
The ones
the
that were
the 22, excluding the
22, right.
BEDB and GBEF.
Got it.
Or to table it or to do part of it, completely up to you, however you want to move forward.
I'm going to consider making a motion to adopt the proposed changes of ASBA Policy Advisory 764-773 and 775-786 from February 24. Do we have a motion?
I would make that motion to consider adopting those proposed changes.
Okay. All right. So Jane is going to make the motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Motion is second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Signify by saying nay. Okay, motion passes. Or,
I'd like to abstain.
okay, and then we have an abstention. Okay, great, thank you.
And Linda, I'll underscore what Andy said earlier. If you go, please do get with them about questions you've got, and if there's anything you feel like, ooh, that's not what I wanted to see go forward, you certainly have the ability to bring that up later and to amend it again if we need to.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'd if there's anything of concern, then we can talk about it, and if we need to bring it back forward, then we can do that at that time. Okay,
True.
very good, thanks. All right. I think we're on item 8C, information and discussion, nope. Yeah, that's right. Information discussing items, 8C1, Mr. Moore.
As presented.
I do have a question that I've never asked this, but it was about the revenues that we have it's the revenue accounts. And the questions that I have is, so we have a budgeted amount, and if you were to look at, so it's our very last column, that we have some revenues, but as that last column, are there plans for those revenues, if you were to look at them?
Are you talking about the balance?
Yeah, so it'd
and
be the
then-
instructional improvements, the Medicaid reimbursements, the forest fees, and then E-rate specifically. Because we kind of do A-rate going into back into technology, right?
Yeah, E-rate, we actually don't get much E-rate anymore because the
that.
county took over the internet
Right.
providers, so the county's benefiting from the E-rate amounts.
Right.
The other accounts, the Medicaid, the forest fees, the civic, those really are our set-asides for specific last-minute emergencies. They are our catch-all accounts.
Yeah.
Medicaid, forest fees, we haven't spent anything hardly in that, and so I think it's approaching around 500,000 right now.
500,000.
So,
Yeah, that's great for us. I mean, it didn't strike me until I kind of looked at it, but, that is important that we budgeted so much, and now we do have something that, if something were to occur, we can use those forest fees. We
Yeah.
can use whatever.
Like a one-time expense. A good example of that is, we project where we'll be for class sizes and needs for numbers of classes and teachers and whatnot. And If we project it high and it comes in low, in my recollection, we've never, as we get to it says in teachers' contracts, yep, if we don't have enough enrollment, we can, you don't necessarily have a job. We've never done that, but we have had situations where, boy, there's more kids than we thought.
Yeah.
And we're not going to go forward with a class of, 35 fourth graders. So so we hire somebody at that point. If we don't have funds like this, or there's some flexibility for a one-time expense like that wasn't part of the budget that was approved, we're in trouble.
Yeah,
We
for
are going to go forward with classes of 35 fourth graders, which we don't want to do. So this last year, good example, we did that at Abaya Judd. We expanded and had a third grade class that way. So we've done that at the elementary school level a bunch. Those are good examples of one-time expenses that weren't budgeted, weren't foreseen by the board, weren't budgeted by the board, but nonetheless is a necessary expense.
Another example is just, about 4 months ago, the boiler chiller here needed repair, $65,000 in repairs.
Is there are there any limitations on what we can use that money for?
No.
Thank you.
Most of these funds are unrestricted. We've got how many, 43 different funds, something like that? And of those
we got
43,
47 funds
there you
or
go.
so.
Over 40 of them are restricted. You can only use these in certain ways, but these ones that Stan is referring to, Medicaid, E-rate, et cetera, those are unrestricted
That's on
funds.
the back.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So we do have good reserves.
Oh, my goodness. As a district, I don't talk to a lot, but I can just say we are healthy, and given something, another pandemic or whatever. I mean, it's a reason why during the pandemic we still paid our contract services and found work for them to do, even though we weren't in session. It's just we have very good reserves.
We've tried to be
Great
really
job,
careful
guys.
over the years. Yeah, we've gone from a situation where we were very close to the bone all the time, and if something unexpected happened, kids were in trouble. That's not a good way to do things. Now, on the other hand, it's not a good idea to get a bunch of money and reserve it from year to year, right? If the state gives us a limited amount of funds, I want those funds, and I know the board backs this up from the way that you voted on our budgets. I want those funds to go to this year's kids and this year's teachers right now. So we have to balance those two priorities, and I feel like we've done a really pretty good job with that.
Well done. Yeah, thanks. Just want to highlight that. Okay, moving on to item 8C2. Review the proposed changes in governing board policies. These are the two pieces that you pulled, Andy, BEDB and GBEF. Those two items. Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, so we, so these were two initially presented last month, but after looking at them a little closer, realized there were some content changes. Is it up there? Yeah. There were some content changes that people brought some feedback on, and we pulled them and made those changes. So the first one is really, I'm going to focus on BEDB, which relates to the governing board agenda. Really, the changes that we made are to reflect the current practices of what's being done. So for example, the proposal that ASBA gave us suggested the adoption of the agenda, then the Pledge of Allegiance. What we've been doing is the Pledge of Allegiance and then the adoption of the agenda. So we flip-flop those. Public comments was listed earlier. We felt it made more sense to put it before voting items rather than before the consent agenda. So again, that was a change we felt made the most sense there.
So what ASBA shared with us was a template for
Right.
how many board meetings are run, and you're just recommending some changes to the board to reflect our longtime practice? Is that-
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we, this was actually one of the examples where there was just a very minor, it was, I think the change that they recommended was, contact the district through email rather than what the policy said by telephone, right? So that was a very minor change, but then as we were looking at it, we realized there was some additional changes that we felt might be needed based on, like I said, current board agenda policies and practices. Any
So-
questions on that?
So when I read it to begin with, the, went F, public comment, I read it as an opportunity, like the city council has for open public comments about anything. And I know we had discussed that at some point earlier, that did we want to have that? Did we not want to have that? And I don't know, I think it's worth a discussion again, whether, because we could, I mean, we could put it in here, it seems like it was in here, whether we want to have the ability for the public to make comments about things that aren't on the agenda. That's how I took it. So I don't know, I'd just like to have a little conversation about it before we decide to, although we do have another, we have a second reading.
another reading in a month.
We have a
Yeah.
second reading,
Yep, yep.
so I don't know if we don't have to have it tonight because it's already 7 and I have to get back to my grandbabies. So, but I'd kind of like to, have the board members think about it, since this is the only time we can get together and talk about it. Think about it and think about what their ideas are, and maybe we can talk about it more next time or something like that.
Yes, because it's our responsibility to create policy. I don't know who they are that are creating or changing the board policy. So that's our
They're
job.
providing.
The only people who change the board policy are in your chair and sitting next to you.
Okay.
This is model policy that was written by the Arizona School Boards Association as a template for you to look at. And if you want to adopt it as is, as we did with 22 other policies earlier, you can do that, or you can make adjustments to it. Andy is based on our long-term practices, recommending to you wording that matches the practices. And if you want to do that, great. If you want to come up with a different practice, we can certainly do that. To be clear, we do have a call to the public every board meeting, anytime we have voting items. And the board is always open to information from the public. Anybody who wants to speak to you about anything, they've got your emails, they can visit with you offline, et cetera, but we don't have a come and speak about whatever you want portion of our meeting. Some districts do, and the city does, you're exactly right. We didn't used to, I'll just really quickly share with you anecdotally, at the city, we didn't used to have that policy. We changed, we did have that policy. The very first person who came and spoke to us, during the open call to public, spoke about aliens coming down from space and how they're trying to rule the world and whatnot. And we spent the amount of time that was allotted to the public listening to something that had zero to do with the business of the public. Humboldt does things that way. They have an open call to the public. People can come and say, you know what? This board member lives across the street from me, and I hate the way she doesn't bring her garbage cans in. That just drives me up. You can do that if you'd like, or you can limit it to the voting items on the agenda, which is what we've always done. It's completely up to you how you want to run the meetings.
So, can you scroll down a little bit at the bottom of the agenda
To the number 2.
to where it says something about community comments? C3? Is it on there?
It's a little farther down, I think.
A little farther down. No, I don't know.
No, it's not.
It's not?
It's number 2, public comments.
Okay, up a little higher.
No, it's on our agenda now. Like, our agenda now has, right underneath you, talking about this, we have community comments shared with the board, governing board. I'd just kind of like to define that. Are these, so is this a place where if the community tells us something and we would like to bring it, so in essence, it's a semi-filtered, open call?
Yeah.
Is that,
I guess that's one way of looking at it.
is that what this section is meant for?
That's the way I interpret it.
Yes. Yeah, so if someone has shared something with you, I have some concerns about, the weeds are growing too high in front of Taylor Hicks, and we got to do something about that. That's a part that's set aside in our agenda for you to share
Okay,
what
so I guess
two
if,
of your 68,000 constituents shared with you.
so,
So where
to
would
be
that
so
on the meeting?
sarcastic.
No, I'm not being sarcastic at all. If there's folks who've shared with you, and you feel like this is an important piece for us to discuss in the board meeting, then you do that. We do need to recognize that if 27 people tell you it's worth 27 voices, if 2 people tell you it's worth 22 voices, if 68,000 people have told you, so just because somebody mentioned to you doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to come to the board. I don't mean to be sarcastic about that at all. It's up to you, and you're right, it's kind of semi-filtered. You would choose whether to bring up what you heard in a discussion with someone.
Am I hearing you correct, though, that you're saying, is that included on this revised?
That's what I'm hearing her say too.
And
I am,
s-
well, now that I noticed that it's not on there,
Might want to add it.
I would like to add that.
It's
on-
currently as a subsection of the information and discussion items, rather than a standalone. So it would be like under, on the revised policy, it would be under I.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
Okay,
that's
so-
how we currently have it.
Information,
Information items. That's I.
Yikes, that's so little.
yeah, I'd like to have it look more like our current format, if you could, Andy, so that we could look at it a little bit better. So you have
Have us-
information and discussion as H, which is our C. Maybe we could get the, so that we don't, Sarah isn't coming up with all these different letters that we already have. I mean,
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. The format of the policy, the outline of a policy, and the format of our agenda don't
Is
match
not
each other. They
mixing?
intentionally don't
Okay.
match each other. We've
Okay.
got this format for policies for every one of the 400-plus policies that
okay,
we've got.
so,
Yeah, I see what you're saying, though.
The board-
It's I there, but it's C on our paper here today. Yeah, you're making a good point.
okay.
But I
Oh,
think
I
what you're saying is you'd like to have a spot somewhere in the policy that says we're open to have people.
We always put on the
Right.
agenda community comments.
Right.
Okay,
I think that's
and
what she-
why are
that's
we
right.
crossing out requests for future agenda items?
Good question. So that's something that, again, we're looking to match our practice. For several years, we had that, and people would say, hey, I've got an idea for something on the agenda. And it's not, it's in the portion of our meeting where we're not to have a lot of discussion. So, well, we're not allowed to have discussion. So if there happened to be two board members who, without discussion, felt that was a good idea, then it appeared on the next agenda. But it's probably better to do it in the mode that we've been doing it.
I
where-
mean, that was on our agenda just recently.
Up until recently, right. But
So
again,
how did it get off of our agenda?
so we've removed it from the agenda because, as I suggest, there's not room for discussion at that point. I can't
But
send an email.
But it was on our agenda until this. I mean, it was on the policy until this.
Now
This
it's being
change.
struck.
I mean, it's not struck till today when we,
Well,
or
second
next
reading.
week.
I'm not positive it's in our current policy or if it's just in
Wasn't
this.
this a-
This is the template
This is
policy
the
that's being
template from
recommended
ASBA.
to us by ASBA. We can look at it.
I'll pull it up real quick.
Yeah.
So, okay,
I
so
would
this,
say
why are we striking on ASBA's template instead of our policy?
Our own, yeah.
Because this was included on the proposal last month, and so we're revising that, taking that
Okay,
off.
so can we look at, for the second reading, can we look at our policy with these appropriate strike-throughs, Andy?
Correct, yes.
If we're going to make changes, it sounds like there's some good suggested changes. We'll need to have a first reading again next month.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, because I don't understand how we're striking stuff on a template policy when we have a policy that's something
Was in
different.
place, yeah.
Do you
Right, so
understand my confusion?
I do. What's struck on the template policy is anything that's different from our currently adopted policy. So those pieces are struck or changed. Anything that's in blue or red is a difference from either our current policy.
So,
or the
yeah,
model
this
policy.
this is current policy,
So it is current policy?
yes.
So we did have
Struck through it
agenda
at one
items
time.
that we haven't been doing.
The last few
and-
months, right.
And you guys struck them without
We've
our,
also been doing the Pledge of Allegiance in a different spot than our policy says. So again, the recommendation, if I'm understanding correctly,
is to
is
clarify?
to match our policy going forward to our practice, where we've had a divergence recently. Our divergence has been, we're not at the end of every meeting saying, anybody have an agenda item for next time, because that's a point in the meeting when we can't discuss things, right? It has to be agendized to discuss, and it's often more useful and helpful. For instance, we had, there was some question about bathroom issues earlier and whatnot. We wouldn't have been able to discuss that at our meeting, where offline I could discuss with individuals and say, what's your thoughts about this? Do you want this agenda? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense what you're saying. I'm just saying I think we just kind of screwed up our So,
Right. Yeah, what we've been
Okay.
doing diverges from our policy. You're exactly right. Same with the order of a couple of things. So Andy's saying, let's fix that. Let's match it with what we're doing. And we can do one of two things, Carl. We can say, let's do the Pledge of Allegiance in a different place. Let's match
okay, I
our
got that.
practice to the policy, or we
got
can
it.
match the policy to the practice. Up to you.
But I think what you're saying is you'd like to still be able to request for future agenda items somewhere.
Well, you can do
In
that at
reading.
any point in the
Yeah, we've been doing it kind of
Yeah.
any
Right,
point
but
in
we
the
don't-
evening.
that's not
So
actually in
anyways,
the
I just wanted to make sure
Right.
this community comments was still in there somewhere, and
good idea.
that we can bring up things, and that is actually where we could bring up things that the public has
And not
discussed.
get threatened with somebody in the room is going to do something if you do. You know, it's like,
Yeah, I was never aware that that was a place where we could do that. I had not been aware that that was where we could bring up those comments. So if we can
Okay.
bring up those comments there,
Yeah,
then
yeah.
I'm totally fine with striking F.
Let's,
Okay.
let's do this. Let's go,
understand.
let's bring this back for the first reading, just for BEDB.
Okay.
During the
Yeah.
course of the month, just look over this a little bit more. And if there's anything in question, obviously bring it up to them individually. We'll discuss it again in the first reading, bringing it back. And then once we're clear and it looks like it's where it wants to be, then we'll bring it forward for the following month to the second. There's no rush on this one
Right.
policy, so.
Right.
Let's
And
do
I'm
that.
perfectly fine with doing the Pledge of Allegiance first and that. I'm not.
well, some of them are like that, you know, but
So, yeah, and if you could, when you bring the policy, Sarah, could you just write a sample agenda, like how the agenda would look, just the titles, with that new policy? That would
can
solve
include that
all
as-
my problems.
We can include that as an exhibit to the
Yes.
policy.
That
That's a
would be
great
perfect.
suggestion.
Do we have any specific comments? Did we go into GBEF yet?
Yeah, I was just going to do that. So GBEF is the next one that was relating to staff use of digital communications. Again, the initial revisions were, like Mr. Tenney mentioned, BlackBerry and things like that. But looking at specifically letter C, talking about what staff use to communicate with students and families. We felt the intent was to protect our students from, making sure that any communication from staff to students is with a district device or a district email that's monitored and protected. The policy, the way it was written, lumped parents into that same group, and we received feedback that, there are staff members who have, relationships with community members or families, and, if I'm talking to a friend of mine who's also a parent of a student, does that mean I have to use my PUSD email anytime I communicate with them? So breaking that up to say, still for staff, any communications what needs to be with district devices, but for staff, it needs to be with district devices if we're talking about school-related items. If you're talking about other items, then using your own personal cell phone or something like that with other parents would be acceptable. So that was the main change there. And then this on the second page, if you have that up.
Andy, could
Yeah.
I ask you one more about that?
Yes.
I believe, now this was before I was on the board, that certain staff had the ability to have like Zoom meetings with the kids when we were all online learning. Has that been rescinded? Because I've been hearing that some staff contact kids after school, but to see how they're doing or whatever, but it's not truly something that's within their purview that they should be doing. So has that all been, is that part of the social media, or, is that in the employee handbook, or how is that monitored?
Yeah, so part part of this policy would address that, right? Making sure that if there is any communication, whether it's email or Zoom, it's through a district device, so it can be, again, monitored and checked. But there's also policy in the handbook that discusses, what topics are appropriate to be
Code of
communicating.
ethics, kind of.
Right.
Okay.
And making sure that it's posted, that any communication includes notification of parents and things like that.
Great.
So
Thank you.
it says approved technologies, controlled and approved. So is that like computer, or is that like a app? Because I know some teachers use different apps
Right,
to
I think-
communicate
Right.
with their students, and there were popular ones here, and then some teachers use this, and some teachers use that. Is there a list of apps that are approved? Did I not look at that part?
No, yeah, it's a great question. So as Andy mentioned, we've got some very specific policies, both within this policy and in other policies, about staff communication with students. And it has, as it's suggesting here, it needs to be with district technologies. And to answer your question,
Is there a list of?
Yeah, there is right here.
Okay.
there are a list of examples up there, but it's not exhaustive. It's not, because there's going to be a new app a month and a half from now, right? So the board policy doesn't attempt to predict what the best communication technology will be 6 months from now or 6 years from now. It
Okay,
gives
so as long as
examples
they
of
use
that.
a
Needs to be district approved. And I'll give you an example with our sports teams at the high school. Help me out if anybody can remember what it's called, but we've got an app. Yeah, Kelsey's looking at it. Sports U. We've got something called Sports U, perfect. And that's the messaging system that coaches are required to use when they get with all the kids on their team. Practice is starting 15 minutes later than usual, guys don't show up until then, et cetera. And all of that's recorded and archived. So if the student gets back and says, Coach, my car broke down, I can't get there, great. But if something untoward happened, and we've never had an example of this in years and years,
Right.
but if a coach did say, hey, let's meet at Sonic afterwards, that's also recorded and archived. And so we could look into that and say, hey, wait a minute, here's something. So that's not something we've ever had an issue with,
right.
but that's why we require
Yeah, I just wondered
district
if there were like
technologies.
district
Student
okayed
safety.
technologies,
Yeah.
or we're just kind of. I'm good.
Yeah, good question. That's something that happens occasionally at schools where people make bad choices, and we do not want that to happen here. So we have as many safeguards in place as we can possibly have.
So on the Chromebooks, I know not Chromebooks, on the laptops, I know to download a program, you need IT to do it. And that the Chromebooks don't take, you can't download anything onto them. Is there a filter that they can't do certain apps on the
Yeah, there is. Actually,
Chromebooks?
There's an app
Shaking
for
his
that?
head yes back there.
Michael, do you mind addressing that super quick? Why don't you come to the microphone so people
I'm
can
sorry,
hear?
not making the meeting longer, and I was going to go home to the babies.
This is important business. This is a
This
super
is
important topic.
important.
Again,
Yeah.
we've
Yeah.
not had an issue with this, but the reason that we talk about this and have policies around it and are very careful about this is we don't ever want to have a problem. So,
Okay.
yeah, go ahead.
Well, just give me a chance to stand up, so I appreciate it. Every program, when it comes to a Chromebook, is actually vetted through our department, and certain standards have to be met with age requirements, things of that nature. Every Chromebook that the district owns is actually managed by our IT department, and nothing can be downloaded. Nothing can be put on the Chromebook per se that would jeopardize any type of communication such as that. There are apps that sometimes I'm trying to think of. Spotify, I think, sometimes has a little chat area in it. I think it's Spotify, if I'm not mistaken. But those are shut down. There's no communication that can go backwards and forwards between students and the outside.
With the Chromebooks.
That's correct. And also, with that matter, when it comes to Windows devices, you have to have admin privileges to download and install a program. And once again, our department vets any type of program for that.
Employees can't do it either.
Yeah,
No.
I can't even
Yeah, I
put something
know.
on
So
my
I can't.
computer upstairs
I know.
unless I get with
I know,
Michael.
you were really good at that, even when I was teaching. Is there so you have a Wi-Fi, this is really off topic. I'll talk to you later.
Okay.
So-
I'll be happy
Yeah.
to
Okay.
talk, so.
So let's
Okay,
do
I
that,
don't-
you know,
I don't
recognize
think
that
it has
this
anything to
is,
do with this.
this is the first
First
reading.
reading. Right.
So we have the month to kind of discuss this.
And we hope you will. If you have questions, please, absolutely. Let's use that month to
Yeah.
make sure you got all the information you need to have a vote.
Excellent.
All right, good. Anything else to add, Andy?
No,
Okay,
I
good.
appreciate all the
Tara's
feedback.
got to get home to the grandbabies. That's right, okay. All right, so 8C3, community comments shared with the governing board. What concerns, comments do the board members hear from the public in general? So I think we were just kind of talking about that. Is there anything that anybody, and recognize, according to this book, board operates in an atmosphere of mutual respect. That's a chapter, so you can say anything you like.
Sorry, I gotta get home.
You can say that right now.
I'm sorry.
All right, nothing? Great. All right, so we're going to move on to 8C4, meeting dates, regular study and voting session. Our next one is Tuesday, May 7th, 2024 at 5 o'clock right here in this room. Another key dates is May 3rd, 2024 is a professional development day, early release for students.
Okay, one question, we are gonna start technically the board meeting at 5:15 to have our study in.
Yeah, that's correct. So
Study session of 5, studying, voting, starting at 5:15.
So if you
Okay,
didn't
thank
read
you.
that chapter, yeah.
that's right. So we'll get our
You
homework
come late.
assignment. That's right.
You got your homework. You got a
All
whole
right.
month.
All right,
Show up at 5:15.
all right. I'm going to adjourn.
It's way too.